Cultural Competence in Modern Ag. My name is Chelsea, and I am on the AFA team. I'm your official host of the day, which is just a fancy term of saying I'm here to help the engagement in the chat keep flowing as we kick things off, and I kick it over to our official presenter, Sarah, in just a few slides. Thank you all for joining us today. Now, without further ado, wanted to set the stage with a couple of housekeeping rules. If you'd like to ask a question during the presentation, post them in the chat. That's my role here, is to make sure I'm lifting these up to Sarah as we go through the content together. Also, when you think about engagement and ways to share your personal testimonies when it comes to this content, post those in the chat as well, because most likely someone in this room can relate to the experience you're having, or it might create a question for them as well. So please post a lot of thoughts, reactions, questions in the chat. We will get to them as they pop up. Last but not least, AFA is sharing the recording with registrants in our follow-up email. So the learning and the fun does not have to stop here. If you want to take this recording and take it forward to your teams, feel free. We want to make sure you can have those discussions in your communities as well. AFA is social, if you didn't know. There's a nice little screen grab there of all the different social media platforms that AFA is present on. So if you have any good content highlights that you want to pull from today and share and express yourself through social media, be sure to tag us. We want to keep the conversation going on social. But in addition to that, AFA over the past few months has also released 2 different podcasts with 2 different audiences to engage. So the one on the left, that is our Magnetic Ears edition. That is where you're going to get the latest and greatest ag news for your daily conversations with your peers in your community. So if you're looking for fast, unfiltered, and all the ag industry buzz you need, tune in to that podcast in particular. The other podcast that AFA has launched is called Cultivating Leaders, and this is a podcast a little bit more driven towards covering topics like mentorship, leadership, and where the future of ag is headed. So if you're curious about where those ag influencers are, what they're thinking, what they're doing, how they're having an impact on the industry, that is the podcast for you. Both are free and available on many different streaming platforms. Another slide here that I wanted to touch on very briefly. If you're looking to virtually volunteer, AFA might be an answer for you. Specifically, you can sign up today with that QR code, but in the month of September, we are looking to secure around 100 volunteers to virtually review essays of students that are applying for 2025 AFA Leaders Conference. I've seen a lot of familiar names already come into this webinar, with many of you either participating in Leaders Conference as an industry professional or a student. Maybe you're an alumni now. You all know the impact conference can have on your development. And so would love to get you engaged in that process and selecting the students who will be joining us in November in Kansas City for our next opportunity. So this information will also be shared in the follow-up email as well. So you can sign up today or before September 8th. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to read a quick bio about our lovely presenter today, Sarah. Sarah Walters is a passionate educator, DE&I advocate, and consultant dedicated to empowering individuals and organizations through inclusive practices and innovative solutions. As the founder of Sarah Walters Company, Sarah provides customized DE&I training, leadership development, and educational consulting. She partners with organizations like AFA to integrate inclusive practices, equip leaders with tools for effective decision-making, and develop strategies that drive meaningful change. Her expertise extends to curriculum development, instructional coaching, and business consulting, helping organizations and educators enhance learning experiences and improve outcomes. However, when she's not working or exploring new ideas, Sarah enjoys spending time with her family, discovering local businesses, cheering for her favorite sports teams, and soaking in the joy of live music with friends. Her mission is clear: to inspire growth, innovation, and meaningful connection at every level. All right, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to kick it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Chelsea. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. All right. Chelsea, you got the slides up? Okay.
Beautiful.
Perfect. So Chelsea already kind of told you where we are going with today. So how does intercultural competence tie into modern agriculture? So I've got some slides, some case studies, some things to talk about. I encourage you all, please use the chat if you have ideas, questions. I'll have a couple polls that we'll do throughout as well. So please be as active as you're able based on what you got going on while you're listening. Chelsea already did an introduction, but I am a former teacher, so my background is in education. I have been working with the Intercultural Development Inventory, which we'll talk about since 2020, which is as long as I've been partnered with AFA. They were one of my first clients, so I really enjoy working with AFA because I get to work with the students, I get to work with the staff, I get to work with you all as industry professionals and really see the whole picture. As Chelsea mentioned, I love to spend time with my family. I have a toddler who was adopted into our family right after I started a business. So if anybody wants to talk about roller coasters, I am all ears and happy to share mine, but I am thrilled to be here and excited to get to know you all a little bit. So we'll talk first just about, why AFA, why does this make sense for them to host this particular conversation? We'll talk about what is intercultural competence, what is the IDI that I referenced earlier, get some common vocabulary, and then we'll focus really on how does this apply to you all. I know that many of you are probably coming from different roles, different businesses, different aspects of the world. So I tried to pick a few different agricultural examples, hoping that they would at least ring true to somebody in the room or be similar to something you've experienced. As Chelsea mentioned, please use the chat to share your own experiences as well, and we're happy to expand those. And then we'll close out on some specific strategies. So where do you go from here, and how do you take this into action? So starting off with AFA and why them, why here? If you're familiar with AFA, these competencies on the left is what they lead with, right? It's on their website. It's what their programming is around. It's how they look at their mission, their goals. And we have these different competencies, and each one of them actually ties to this topic as a webinar. So while cultural intelligence may be an obvious answer, why talk about this here? Every single one of their AFA competencies ties into what we're going to talk about today. I already said that I get to work with all buckets, which I love. So I started with the students in 2020, and we continue to expand and grow as we look at how do we set everyone up for success, right? So if we're bringing intercultural competence into our student leadership and their training and their journey, then we want to ensure we empower the staff to support them. And if we've empowered the students and we've empowered the staff, well, then those are the people who are setting the stage for conference, and the rest of you all come to the table, and we want you to be just as bought in and just as in the loop or in alignment on what is happening. And so we've started to bring these webinars to you all as that extra piece of the puzzle. And how do we prepare everybody to walk into Leaders Conference with the same vocabulary, the same alignment on mission and purpose, and how this all connects. And so this is one opportunity to do that with you all. So why now? Obviously, there's a few different reasons. Our political climate is changing. It's creating more need for these conversations. It's also creating for some people hardships for these conversations from a funding standpoint. But as our political climate unfolds, our demographics aren't changing. We continue to see that our diversity is evolving, it's expanding. We're seeing more and more diverse groups at all ages and all stages, which means we're going to continue to see this being a necessary conversation, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life, whether you're marketing new audiences, you're onboarding new employees, all of that is going to ring true. And so that's kind of where we're leading with this. I'm going to put a link in the chat in case you don't want to pull out your phone on the QR code. But I'd like to hear from you all when looking at these cultural competencies, which are you most relying on? Which ones are really speaking to you? Because we can talk about each of them in this webinar, and I really want to see where it's hitting you the most. So you should be able to click that link. It's going to open up a Slido asking you to rank the competencies. You should be able to drag them. So you're putting them in order. If for some reason technology isn't working, please always feel free to just use chat and give us an answer. It's okay if it's not in the same spot. Great. So Chelsea, are you guys able to see Slido when I switched, or are you still looking at slides?
We are looking at the voting as it's taking place,
Okay,
the ranking.
perfect. That was what I was hoping it was set up to do. So thank you for confirming. So good. As we're seeing, all of these competencies are touching all of you, which I anticipated, but we can see some weighing in a little bit more. So adaptability and change currently in the lead, which is very applicable to our conversation today. So that is good to know. Teamwork and collaboration, definitely a part of that. So again, each one of these will tie in. But looking at adaptability and change specifically, what we're going to look at is how we adapt across cultures in terms of workforce, in terms of marketing, in terms of our actual organization, how we physically are working together. So we'll have some examples that should really speak to that. So thank you for sharing, and feel free to add your vote as I continue to move on. Okay. So intercultural competence, I've used that phrase and it's a mouthful, and it is a developmental concept where we are assessed on a continuum, and it stems from Dr. Mitchell Hammer's work. And so he is the one who created the concept. He's the one who built the intercultural development inventory tool. And so when he looks at these conversations around diversity, around equity, around inclusion, around growth, belonging, all of these conversations, he continued to see a trend that in his mind needed a solution. So a lot of our initiatives have been diversity focused. And diversity is really just our demographics. It's the who, right? It's numbers. And so I can say that I'm diverse because I have different people checking different boxes, and so many of them are what percentage or whatever it is that my grant or my funder or my mission told me to do. And I can say, yeah, I'm successfully diverse. The problem is diversity by itself doesn't give us inclusion. And without inclusion, we're not likely to retain those customers or to retain those retain those individuals, those coworkers, those staff. We're not likely to retain or be successful with those ideas. And so the goal really isn't diversity at the end. The goal is to start with diversity, and the goal is to end with inclusion. And so Dr. Hammer looked at, well, how do we get there? We have a room full of people with a variety of differences. We want to get to that piece of inclusion where we see our outcomes, we see growth, we see change, we see that new audiences, new people have been brought in. How do we get from one to the other? And the answer for him was this concept of intercultural competence. So that's the how piece, that's the missing puzzle piece. And that's, how do we make this group of people work? How do I sit in a room with people who are different from me? How do I create a new partnership, find a new client where I know we have some significant differences or obvious differences? How do I use that so that we both grow? How do I use that so that the value of our differences is seen while also leaning on those commonalities? How do we work together productively, efficiently? And so that's where this intercultural competence comes in. And so when I mentioned the development inventory, that's the tool that assesses this competence. And so that's how we know where we are and what we need to do to continue growing. And so we start with this concept to lead off the conversation. And so you'll see, again, this idea that intercultural competence is not about changing your mind. It's not about you having to believe something different. It's not about you thinking you're wrong or someone else is right. It's not any of that. It's all about perspective. It's all about understanding. So to attain higher intercultural competence, what we want is we want to be able to shift our perspective to understand you from your point of view. If you and I don't agree on something, I want to know why you believe what you believe. I may not change my mind, but I want to change my perspective and understanding why you come from that point of view. So we want to be able to shift our perspective. And in doing so, we want to be able to adapt our behavior. Again, these are behaviors that respect our differences, right? I don't want to do something that makes me uncomfortable, and I don't want to do something that makes you uncomfortable, but I want to make changes that I can make that help us work together more smoothly, that help us understand each other better, that help us come to that productive, efficient place of work, especially in a professional setting, knowing that we have these differences and commonalities and knowing that there's strengths in both. So we're going to go back to Slido, and I'm going to put a second question in there. So give me just a second. Active listening 100% is a huge piece of it, because in order to be a true active listener, we have to give, we have to participate in the conversation. We have to understand. We can't just hear it to hear it. So this next question that you should see pop up on your Slido is, where do you see this impacting your role? So thinking about your role, are you looking for new audiences? Are you trying to form a new partnership? Maybe it's with somebody in a different industry. Maybe it's somebody in a different geographic location. But where do you see this concept of changing perspective, of understanding each other, of valuing differences? Where do you see this making a difference or an impact on your role specifically in the ag industry? So this one should just be an open type.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
The link in the chat sent me to the what skills are essential for building trust. Could you post the where
Hold
do you
up.
see individual? Yep.
Is it? Oh, there we go. Sorry. Is it there now? If you refresh, do you have it? It should pull up now. That same link should pull up the intercultural competence.
It's on my end, it's still saying what skills are essential for building trust.
Then we'll try a new link.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yes. And you can also feel free to type in the chat, but just thinking through where, how might this impact you all? You guys talked about adaptability and change being a core competency. So how do we see this connecting and driving the conversation forward? Chelsea, I thought I saw a question pop up, but it disappeared. So just let me know if I miss one. I thought I saw one earlier.
I thought I did too. I think it disappeared, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay. Absolutely. Relationships, teammates, vulnerability. I like that word. We have to be vulnerable to understand these conversations, to approach these conversations, to see where someone else's difference might be of greater value in that particular moment. Trust and connection, 100%. Collaboration internally and externally, open lines of communication. I like that, being challenged in a good way. Yeah, knowing the nuance there. So how can we be more adaptable? How can we think of new ideas, new ways of thinking? So you guys, hopefully there's quite a few answers in there. So most of you are seeing some sort of relatability, right? Something where this would connect to what you're doing. And again, feel free to add in here as we move. But I want to make sure we get to the how does this look like? What does this look like in the ag world? So we're going to have a couple different case studies. And I want to preface this by telling you all, you are going to get a document in the follow-up email that has the sources and the links and further context. So please know that I'm going to give you just a snippet, but you will have information to dive in deeper on your own. And so the first two I wanted to look at, there's a Swedish example. And so there are 8 agricultural businesses in Sweden, and they're looking at how farmers are attracting and retaining workers. And so looking at employer branding, things like fulfilling employment promises, benefits, and a reputation as inclusive employers. So that was part of what they were looking at. And what they found in this particular study is that they had higher retention. They had higher motivation when they were investing in these things, when they invested in inclusive culture, when they were meeting the expectations. So you remember what everybody said in your interview? Did you actually see that when you got the job, right? Did that culture reign true? Or is that a selling point to encourage you? When they were fulfilling those promises. And so their reputation as an employer, for their internal staff, but also for their hiring and how people viewed them, improved through that investment. right? So that's a qualitative example. There is further study for you to read, but we know that we like to see numbers, right? We know that we like to see, well, what does this actually look like besides the feel-good story? So I wanted to pair this alongside this example in Napa. And so there's a vineyard in Napa that also was looking at assessing job satisfaction, communication, turnover, so similar ideas. And they found that interpersonal communication, which is influenced by our cultural understanding, was the strongest predictor of workers' intent to stay. So a lot of you on that Slido gave examples around communication and collaboration. This study found that communication, when there were issues around communication, misunderstandings, misinterpretations, not feeling heard, not feeling valued, that accounted for 23% of their turnover, which was the largest single indicator of turnover. Okay, so we have the feel-good story, we have the qualitative example with the Sweden case study, but we also have some numbers behind it with Napa. We're seeing in both instances, internally as an organization, not specific to ag, but these are ag examples of how this is true in your industry as well. We're seeing that communication, that collaboration, that understanding, that seeing each other's perspective is a key indicator in your workforce being successful, in your organization, your employees, your teammates. So I wanted to start here, just kind of lay the groundwork. Oh, thank you. Yeah, communication. So just using the thumbs up or in chat, and I'm going to guess based on the competencies that we have some yeses, but can anyone give me a thumbs up if your organization has struggled with retention and if you believe it has any connection to communication? So have you had those communication issues? Has it come up in retention? Are you seeing people leave? A thumbs up if that is relatable or maybe assumed. You may not know for sure, but something that you're perceiving as part of the problem. So I'm seeing some thumbs across the board. Great news if you're not putting your thumb up, that's the goal. But for those of you who did, we want to think about this concept of intercultural competence being one of those action items. Okay, so we'll get to strategies at the end, but kind of keep that back in your head that this is one of those possibilities. Right. So moving to Africa and Chicago, thinking about global markets. So the agriculture industry is massive, and there are many parts that are region specific, right? There's certain areas that are better for growing certain things, or there's areas that have more need, more demand for certain things. And so in this particular example, Chromatin, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a US-based sorghum seed company, and they were looking to partner with Zod Holdings, which is in South Africa, and it's a distributor, right? So they were looking at how can this distributor help us make more? How can we both grow? How can we both win from this example? South Africa had the climate that they really wanted for their seeds, and the Chicago-based company had this new idea, this new hybrid. And so when they went to get together and to talk about how this would work, one of the first things they realized is that the African farmers were traditionally replanting seeds. And when you replant seeds year after year after year, you get less and less yield year after year after year. So they weren't going to get the impact they wanted. They weren't going to get the yields immediately, the turnaround immediately, if they went with the traditional method of farming in the place where their partner lived. And so how they were able to go about this is they were able to bring in training, right? So Chicago came to them and said, okay, well, this is how we might do it. This is where we see a difference in not replanting versus planting. And also, this is a hybrid seed that we have created that's going to help you get more yield and is going to be affordable in this partnership. And how can we both win in this conversation? But they couldn't just take that and hand it to them, because nobody likes to be told like, well, I can do it better, right? I know a different way. I know a better way. So it involved conversation. It involved training. It involved recognizing the value in how they were currently doing it, recognizing the value in where they were geographically, the value in their knowledge of that land, and then saying, okay, how do we take all of that and how do we improve it by introducing something new? So seeing the value of both situations led to a very successful partnership. The farmers ended up seeing 3 to 5 times higher yield, which when they saw that, then built trust in their relationship that, you know, these people were here for real to help. They weren't just here to sell something and to run away. They were here to help both companies succeed. And so this has been a very successful partnership. And again, all of this is coming to you to dive in deeper, especially if this one is applicable to your specific industry. So now, Chelsea, we're going to look at the one about building trust across cultures. And so I'll add that in here. And so when we think about this example, trust is a huge part of it, right? For me to forego something I've been doing successfully, for me to try something new, especially something new that impacts the dollar, the bottom line, my business. Trust is a big piece of that. And so skills for building trust, I see patience. I love transparency. I'm a big believer in that. We don't have to know all the answers, but we do have to admit what we do and don't know. Vulnerability, listening. Chelsea brought up active listening earlier. I think empathy is huge, right? So learning something new and growing may involve us letting go of something that we felt strongly tied to our identity or we felt confident in. And that's hard, right? So being empathetic in that teaching and that introduction and leaving space for what you've done is good. It's really good. How do we make it better? Versus saying what you're doing is not so great and let me fix it for you, right? So there's a difference in that conversation and that tone, bringing empathy. So lots of new words have added. I like curiosity, mental safety, questions. Yeah, we've got those three kind of coming in at the forefront, sorry. But yeah, so thank you. Yes, definitely seeing trends here. Great. Okay, we have another one to get through, and then I know we've got some conversations happening that we'll bring up. So I want to make sure. So another example, so when we think about the agriculture industry in food sciences, consumer products, things like that, we had a food process company, and they were looking to expand their product line, right? So they realized that their demographics were shifting, who was around them, who their clients were was changing. And then they were starting to see with that changing clients, they weren't getting the same sales they used to get. And so they did some strategic planning, some strategic asking of their community to figure out, how do we bring these voices into the decision making? How do we invite them to the table? And what they found is what they needed to do was have culturally specific ingredients. If their demographics were changing, they had to change what products they were offering. And so sometimes this can be something very small. Sometimes this can be a very large task, right? So I don't mean to say these are simple or overnight changes, but what they realized is for us to be successful where we are, we have to acknowledge that the community around us is evolving and we need to sell to the community we have, right? This is who we're looking for. And so this is things like thinking about the Americanized option of, let's say, cranberry juice. And what would someone in another culture be looking for on the shelf for that same need, right? So something tart, something maybe for their kids, something for themselves, something to mix in, that flavor, what that purpose is of the cranberry juice. We're not going to literally find a cranberry juice in every country and culture, but we're going to find an alternative to that. And so when they started putting those products on their shelves, they didn't have to remove the original products, they added to it. And then they were able to maintain the clients that they had and reach the evolving clients that they wanted. And so here are just some very basic examples. Green tea is a very Eurocentric concept. Matcha is of a different culture, very similar concept, very similar purpose. It's another item, right? So you'll see these things evolve and grow over time. I stuck with beverages just to keep it simple, but you could see how this would apply out. Bread is an incredible conversation of how many different options you can look at and how bread is used in different cultures and the different purposes based on how it's used and what it's used for explains why we need different, textures and firmness and things like that. But the results are there. The numbers are there. 20% revenue increase, which makes sense. I'm selling things that the people around me want to buy. So then they bought more. So then we all win, right? So where do we go with this information? And I wanted to take some time to really focus on this is all great, We love to hear it. We all want to see the numbers go in the right direction. But how do we do it? And so here are some of our strategies and our growth opportunities in 4 different categories. So this first category, it goes beyond representation. This goes back to that statement about diversity isn't the end result. Diversity is step 1. So representation, or saying we've met diversity, we have parity for our county, whatever terminology you're using based on how you're measuring it, can't be the finish line. Okay. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we don't just have diversity in the room, but that we're going beyond that representation? Looking at your leadership, looking at your advisory roles. Do they reflect your overall organization? Do they reflect your overall community? Do they reflect your customers? Right? If you're trying to expand to different audiences and there is no one in leadership who understands that audience, you are going up a really steep hill trying to be successful in that battle, right? So hiring is always a hard conversation because you may or may not have that authority. And you also are dealing with who applies, and you don't have control over who applies. So maybe you're not getting a significantly diverse pool of applicants. So how does this apply to you? Start looking at those advisory roles. Start looking at board members. Start looking at partnerships. If you're not getting the people to come to you to hire them, to change your organization, how can you bring people along for the ride in a different role alongside you, right? Maybe it's not literally an employee. Another way that we can see this occur is mentorship programs. Okay. So anything that amplifies your voices that aren't represented. So if we look at our leadership and we look at the overall organization and we see a gap where leadership isn't representing this particular group, whether that's a gender-based group, a religious-based group, an ethnic-based group, racial-based group, whatever it is, this group doesn't have anybody on leadership that aligns with that goal. How do we mentor this group? How do we amplify their voice? Maybe it is a committee that gives them a direct line to leadership where now they can say, we're empowered as a committee, we all get it, right? So you get a little bit of that validation, and then you say, we have a line to say to leadership, hey, how did you miss this, right? This isn't going to work with our audience, with our culture, with our community. This isn't going to work with this customer, right? We've missed a piece of the puzzle, and they have a pathway to leadership that supports them in their inclusivity and belonging, but also supports the leadership and understanding a perspective they don't have. Okay, so even if hiring is not feasible, there's opportunities there to go beyond that representation and to make sure that we're not just checking the diversity box. Going alongside that, we get into the second bucket, and this is our feedback loop. This goes to that active listening again. If I, as a leader, am asking for your opinion, it is my responsibility to actually hear your opinion. That doesn't mean I can do everything that is asked of me. Maybe I don't have the finances. Maybe I don't have the authority. Maybe I just don't agree that that's the best path forward. But it is my responsibility to truly listen. Why do you think that? What made you come to that? What data is behind that? What feeling, idea, experience? Where does that come from? I want to hear you out. I want to understand your perspective. And if my answer as a leader ends up being that's not the right path, I have that feedback loop to come back to you and say, hey, I really appreciated this idea. I could see where you came to it. I can see how you saw the value. Here's my problem. This is going to block us. This doesn't make it possible. So I heard you. I value you. Unfortunately, we can't take that, but I'm going to give you the respect of explaining that so that you know I didn't just brush it off, right? I did hear that answer. I want to have those perspectives inform strategies. I always think about one of my favorite definitions of leadership has to do with a leader is the person who can recognize the gaps that their strength fits with. And in doing so, you also recognize the gaps that your strength doesn't fit with. And when that happens, you find the people around you that can better serve that area, that are better equipped for that, and know and recognize and have the humility to say, hey, you're the right person for this job. I'm the right person for this job, right? So bringing in those diverse perspectives. Surveys is a really great way to do it. I know it gets old filling them out and clicking them and answering them, but it gives you an anonymous opportunity where if we don't have those affinity groups or those committees where we can give that pathway to leadership, surveys allow people to do that safely. Especially if they feel like they're definitely the only person feeling it or hearing it or thinking it, having that opportunity anonymously brings that feedback still, without having that I have to raise my hand, I have to say it in front of you. Then we get into training, right? And so, how do we have industry specific training on cultural awareness, on inclusive leadership, on how this affects you? And so I always joke with AFA, I consider myself agriculture adjacent. I grew up in 4 H, I was a 4 H youth specialist, I have family who farmed, I lived in the suburbs, right? So it is around me, it touches me in a lot of different ways, but I don't pretend to be the expert in ag. When I come to trainings with AFA, whether it's students or staff, I want to have examples that are relatable to them, but I also want to listen to their examples. I also want to recognize that they're the experts in ag. I'm coming to talk about intercultural competence. I'm here coming to talk about leadership, but I need that impact for it to make sense, right? And so being very intentional that you have training, but you have training that's going to work for your organization, where you are and what you need. Real world scenarios as much as possible. Engagement is higher, understanding is higher, mastery is higher. So when you look at the training that you are looking for and the person who you're bringing in to do it, that is something you need to require. It needs to relate directly to us. We need to be able to talk about and see it and apply it to what we do, because you can understand or you can learn the greatest thing. And if you don't apply it, your retention is going to go way down. You're not going to hold on to that for as long as if you can immediately apply it, put it into action, and see how that works. And then the final area, we look at peer-to-peer learning. Where are there knowledge sharing forums? How can we encourage our coworkers, our partners, our clients to share across cultures, across groups, where we're learning from each other, employees, stakeholders, all of the pieces, all of the angles are contributing ideas. How do we partner internationally or across the country or across the region, right? Across the county, whatever that looks like. How do we partner with different groups and different people where we're continuing to expand what our community looks like? That by default, if you're continuing to expand the circle around you and you're doing it with this thought of, I'm not just looking for representation, I want to learn from you. I want you to learn from me. I want this to be a relationship where we both see value. Then continuing to increase that diversity will help lead to greater inclusion. You just have to be intentional and strategic about it. These are not all the answers. Some of these are easier to take. Some of these are more applicable than others. These are some to get you started. And these are some that, especially if I look at these, some of these are much easier to take into account today versus next year. Depending on your industry and where you're coming from, I'm going to hand you these case studies. So when we think about real world examples, I'm going to give you in this email some of them already. When we talk about training, you'll get this in your email as well. But I am offering for anyone on this call a 30-minute free call to talk about what training you want, what training you need, how this applies, answer questions, whether that means you hire me or hire someone else. How can I take this and make sure that you're able to apply it? And so you'll have a link for that as well. But really think about action items and where we go from here. That being said, I want to make sure we have time for conversation. So Chelsea, I know there was at least one. I will put the scheduling link in the chat, and then I really want to open the mic and make sure we get to hear from anyone who has thoughts or comments or questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. As you're navigating your screen, I'll go ahead and go to the chat. We do have a question. I'll go ahead and read it out loud for those who are maybe traveling in their cars. Question is from Jack. In light of the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran, I've been thinking about the long-term potential of economic cooperation as a path to stability. Iran has the largest cultivated area in the Middle East, while Israel is a regional leader in the agriculture technology startups. Could there be a room for discussion on mutually beneficial collaboration? My thinking is inspired by the post-World War II economic partnership between the US and Japan, which helped shift their relationship. Sarah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Obviously, I do
Yeah.
not have the answers to solve the relationship, but I love where your head is. So one of the things that can contribute to the demise of those relationships and the tension of those relationships is when we're coming from what's called a monocultural mindset, which means that we only understand from our perspective. It's really easy to get into that black and white, good and bad, that binary type of thinking, right? And so when you're looking at these two groups that feel very polarized right now, where there's heavy conflict, it is highly likely that a lot of people in each side, in each group, do not understand the perspective of the others. So when they see something that is done that they don't agree with, their brain developmentally is saying, I believe this is right. This is the right way to do it. They're doing the opposite of right. If I'm not able to put myself in your shoes, then my brain can only understand the opposite of right as wrong. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be cruel. That's where I'm at. Developmentally, I don't have a tool to figure out something else. So what you're bringing up is a really, really awesome opportunity to start a conversation when you don't have that perspective is how do I get people in the room that want to be in the room with people who they typically do not think they like or think they respect or think they want to talk to, and that answer is what is mutually beneficial? How do we value our differences? And so I love that you brought up what each of them brings to the table. And so Iran having that largest cultivated area, Israel having those technology startups, there is clear value in their differences. And if there was a conversation that started there that said, we recognize and we see the value in what you're doing with your startups, and then vice versa, we recognize and we see the value that you have in your cultivated land, right? We see how these two could connect and grow. Can we have a conversation where that is our primary focus? And in doing so, to your point, we're going to learn more about each other because we have to talk to each other to accomplish this. We have to be in the same room. And as we start to have conversations and as we start to learn, our brain starts to realize there aren't two boxes, they don't fit. My brain knows they aren't like me, but my brain is learning they aren't wrong. So if I don't have two buckets, what do? Well, developmentally, you're coming out of a monocultural mindset. You're coming into what's called an intercultural mindset, where now I can say, I understand from your perspective. This is why you're perceiving it this way. This is why you feel strongly this way. This is why you do it this way. And I either agree or disagree, because remember, that's not the point, but I understand. So now there's value in that difference, and there's less fear, there's less polarization, there's less hate around that difference when I can make sense of it. And you're right, post World War II, we saw some of that with the US Japan and how when they partnered, it did start to shift that relationship, which was in desperate need of a shift after what happened in the different events of that time. So do I have the person to call to start that conversation? No. Do I think this is an absolutely valid path to approach it? 100%. I love that you brought that up. I love the mutually beneficial collaboration because that speaks exactly to this concept of how do I value a difference? You bring something different to the table, and instead of being afraid of it, I want to see the strength in it. And that is exactly what that conversation would do. Um, and yes, I appreciate it's not about politics. This is about the industry. This is about peace. This is about growth. This is about expansion. Because again, it's not about saying who's right and who's wrong. It's about saying how do we come together so that we all win? So we're more productive, we're more efficient, we have higher yields, more revenue, whatever the case is. All of this applies in the professional workforce. And that brings us back to those AFA competencies. And a conversation Tracy and I continue to have is intercultural competency. It's a soft skill. It is a part of leadership. It is a part of communication. It is a part of collaboration. It is one piece of the puzzle to achieve all of those things. And that's a great example of how we could do that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Jack's giving the hands up or the thumbs up.
Okay.
I can respond too if you want me to.
Oh, please do.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Sorry for this super loaded question. Did not want to get political at all. It's just I was saying, just watched the news, just got sad. So I've been thinking, what could actually be done to stop this? Because I'm tired of waking up and just seeing a headline that just gives me a bad day. So boom, I just put that in the chat. But yeah, does anyone else have any other thoughts or like if good idea, bad idea? I just want to discuss intercultural competency and especially from this paradigm and get feedback. I really do appreciate the feedback, Sarah. Like it's been inspiring. I've loved this call.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. And I think what you're doing is step one, throw out an idea. Who's on board, who's advocating, who knows somebody to say it to, how do we get these ideas moving? And the only way to do it is to start the conversation. So yeah, I would love to hear if anyone else has thoughts, whether they want to chat them, unmute, or even follow up with Jack later. It's definitely a conversation worth having.
While our friends are thinking of questions, I've got one, Sarah.
Okay.
Just thinking about your work in this space, and your years of experience here and all the different conversations you've had, what has been a success story for you when it comes to intercultural competence, with either a client you've worked with or just a personal relationship? Can you just share the story of
Yeah.
how two people entered this space, maybe not seeing eye to eye, but walking away uh, amicable?
Yeah. I have a couple, but I think so. One that I really like to share and is in a similar agriculture-based space. When I was working with 4-H and we started this work, my boss is a Mexican immigrant. So she comes from a very different lifestyle than most of our Missouri 4-Hers. If any of you know the 4-H program, its history is very much rooted in the rural communities. And while it has grown and expanded, it does still have a very significant um, participation in those areas, right? And so a lot of our 4-H demographics are more rural, are more conservative, are more white, come from these very similar looking communities. And so it was big, it was different when she came in, right? She wasn't what they were used to seeing or hearing. Her accent was hard. She speaks fluent English, but she was 40 when she moved here. So that accent is not going away, right? Sometimes she accidentally speaks in Spanish when she's translating in her head. And then she came to our staff and she's like, we're going to do the IDI. We're going to do this big intercultural competence initiative. And while her heart was in the right place, there was a lot of fear, a lot of hesitation, a lot of skepticism that she was going to start telling people that they were wrong and that they had to change and that their way wasn't okay anymore and that we couldn't do what we'd always done and we didn't value what we'd always done. And so as I got to start leading these groups with my coworkers. The signups weren't rolling in really quick all of a sudden. There was a lot of like, well, I don't know if I want to raise my hand and do this. I don't know if Sarah's going to make me feel better, give me ideas, or how will it apply to my community, right? And so there was one individual in particular who I have a lot of respect for. We're very good friends, and he would say this. He is a 60 plus conservative white man from rural Missouri who's been extension his whole career, right? FFA extension. I mean, he 100% represents that stereotype. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to join my group, but he is also an academic. And so he wanted to see, he's like, I need to learn about it. I need to hear it out. And he gave me probably the most honest feedback of anyone in that circle, and that I don't even remember how it came up for me to say it. And so this goes to tell you how much the little things matter. I was talking about cultural dimensions and diversity, and instead of immediately going to race, which people frequently do, I started out listing other dimensions of diversity, and I brought up being left-handed and how the left-handed community is a minority, and that is a dimension of diversity compared to the right-handed community. Unknowingly, he is left-handed, and he's had this struggle his whole life, and he had never heard or described as a minority where he had that validation of, yeah, I'm constantly adapting for everybody else. I'm constantly moving and doing this. And just that little piece of validation opened his mind to understand that, like, I was not here to tell him what to believe. I was here to help him form a different perspective and understanding. And because I said that one little thing, probably not even intentionally, I don't know that I planned that in my talk, it opened his mind and he became our biggest advocate in the state. So the guy that you would never expect looking at him to be the one to raise his hand and be like, I want to do DEI work. He was the one who went around the state telling our colleagues, this is worth your time. This conversation is important. He started to see where my boss was coming from and what she was going for. Did they agree on everything? Of course not. But he saw the value in it because that piece of validity and community was formed. And so he, especially when I talk to groups that have a little bit more hesitation, have a little bit more tradition rooted, where they're worried about, how do these changes impact that tradition and our roots and our history. He's an example I think of often.
That's amazing. Just a quick reaction there, Sarah. I posted in the chat around finding that commonality really helped make that connection for your friend. It makes me think about AFA Leaders Conference coming up in November and how very much like you said, when we think about diversity, usually our minds go specifically to ethnicity and race, but
Yep.
diversity is so much more broader than that. And when we think about the 1,500 people we bring to Kansas City, there's so much diversity with age and geographic location and interest in agriculture, but we're all coming together because we have the commonality of we're here to make the industry better. Like at the end of the day, that's why we're here. And so I thought that was really powerful. Very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that especially if you think about bringing this work to your organization or these conversations, if you have that hesitation of, we don't have a diverse community, how do we talk about this? I would challenge you to think about those other layers of diversity, because culture truly does mean so much more than race and ethnicity. And while those are significant topics in their own right and need to be discussed, there are so many other layers of culture. And a lot of times, if we start there, people are more willing, are more comfortable, are more engaging, and then we add in, right? We don't have to jump in with the hardest topic based on our country's history and every event that's happened and our current political climate. We don't have to go there first. We can talk about differences in gender. That's one thing we talk a lot about with the advisors. I know the agriculture world is shifting, but there's a lot of fields in the agriculture industry that are still male dominated. What does that look like for your female students? Socioeconomic, right? I know one thing that's come up is just regionally, right? You guys have recently had a student, I'm trying to remember if it was this year or last year that I had this conversation, but she talked about the difference in growing up in California and then going to college in the Midwest, and what she knew as agriculture in California and what she knew as agriculture in the Midwest, and then looking at where she was going to go next in that next job. And yes, it was technically the same thing in each community, but culturally very different. And so when we have those conversations, they tie directly to who we are and what we're doing. So our retention and our mastery from an academic standpoint is going to improve. But B, we're going to create that community and increase that comfort a lot easier. And then we can always stair step in some of those harder conversations if they're relevant along the way.
So it looks like we've got about 4 more minutes. So if anybody has one last question they want to ask before we officially close the program, now is the time.
And again, I think all links are in the chat, and they'll all also go out in the follow-up email with the slides and the additional case study information.
Yep. Jack, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have a question? Or were you trying to react? I do that all the time.
I just wanted to add to Tracy. I was an AFA ambassador back in 2022. I just graduated from Iowa State and thought I'd say hi. That's all.
You should say hi. Tracy's wonderful.
I know, I miss her. You on?
Thanks, Jack. And yes, I am on. Thanks, Jack. It's good to see you and hear from you. And thanks for being here. Sarah, you're amazing as always. Chelsea, you're an amazing host. So thank you all.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I
Oh, go ahead,
oh, go
Sarah.
ahead, Chelsea.
Just
Um,
go ahead and then I'll close it.
Okay, I was gonna say, and yeah, I love that you brought that up, Jack, because one of my favorite things about AFA and working with AFA is the community and the layers and how it's evolved. And so where I started just knowing the students and their perspective and getting to know the staff and then getting to know some of the professionals through webinars like this and then them bringing me along with the partnership with Manners and the work that they're doing there. And so I love that even though I've been here for 5 years, it continues to evolve and add different layers and steps. And that's one way of continuing to expand, our community and our knowledge and our conversations. So I'm always appreciative when they call, and it's a great community, great organization. I'm not shocked you wanted to say hello. They're people I love to spend time with, and I think it speaks volumes for them and how they really walk the talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you so much for your time today. AFA will never let you go, so please don't leave us because we love your
Not
knowledge,
planning
we
on
love
it.
your perspective, and we love that you're able to engage with not only our students, but our professionals and our alumni and everybody in between. So everybody on this call, I hope you enjoyed your time today with us. Quick reminder, reach out to Sarah if you want to continue the conversation. The QR code is on that screen. We'll also include some information in the follow-up email to keep the conversation flowing. But this is the official close. So thank you for your time. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Is Tracy going to stick around for a little bit? Because I just want to say hi. If not, it's okay.
She transferred to her phone, so she went from computer